Hi everyone! Today I'm talking about female hysteria and how it's been diagnosed and treated throughout history. Hysteria was first recorded nearly 4,000 years ago, when ancient Egyptians noticed behavioral abnormalities in women which they attributed to having a wandering uterus. One of the oldest methods to treat hysteria involved placing sweet-smelling things between a woman's legs in an effort to coax the uterus back into its natural position. The Greeks generally accepted the wandering uterus theory, but took it a step further by including an inability to reproduce or unwillingness to marry as additional indicators of the condition. Aristotle and Plato theorized that hysteria was directly related to women's lack of sexual activity, which made the uterus act sad or bad. Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, even had success treating hysteria through pelvic massages. Up to this point in history, hysteria was considered to be a medical concern. St. Augustine of Hippo was the first to imply that hysteria was related to the original sin and was God's way of punishing women for their disobedience. This idea began to take hold across Europe and made treating hysteria less about one's body and more about her soul. With hysteria being classified as a form of demonic possession, exorcisms became commonplace, and while most agreed that a woman was not to blame for her possession, if a clergyman were not able to rid the soul of its impurity, the next course of action might have involved accusations of witchcraft and a stake. In 11th century Europe, medical practitioners again accepted pelvic massages as an effective treatment for hysteria, but it was unpopular to recommend at the time, as neither doctors nor the husbands of the afflicted generally wanted to perform them. Another physician of the time, Constantine the African, felt that hysteria was a symptom of sexual frustration so strong that it led to madness, which, he emphasized, was not a problem that needed a priest. In the 13th century, English doctors and clergymen would diagnose hysteria in women who were believed to have been hexed by a witch when they began to display higher intelligence than was natural for a woman. The recommended cure for hysteria was thought to be permanent pregnancy and was said to be prevalent in virgins, widows, and spinsters. It also only affected women between the onset of puberty to menopause. To make sure you caught that, hysteria was diagnosed to women who did not have a man to constantly hump them and who were within the age range that men found them to be useful resources that needed to be controlled and continually plundered with reckless abandon. Isaac Baker Brown performed a number of clitoridectomies, which is exactly what you're imagining, throughout the mid-19th century in an effort to rid women of their hysterical behavior. But in a rare win for women, he was ousted from the Obstetrical Society in 1867 for malpractice. Despite its long history, doctors were never able to pinpoint a concise list of symptoms that would point to hysteria, with one American doctor writing 75 pages of potential signs and noting it was an incomplete list. In reality, hysteria was a catch-all diagnosis for anything men found mysterious or unmanageable in women. Pelvic massages continued to be the most effective treatment of the time, and doctors made a lot of money exclusively treating middle and upper-class women suffering from the condition. However, after complaints from doctors saying the treatment took too long and was required too often, a mechanical solution arrived in 1873. The first vibrator was developed for use in an asylum in France and was only available for doctors performing a procedure. However, with the spread of electricity during the turn of the century, vibrators soon made their way directly into homes of consumers. And for absolutely no reason anyone can guess, the number of reported hysteria cases began to drastically decline. No, seriously, look at this graph showing reported cases of hysteria. Look at 1900. Look at 1910. Now look at this ad from a 1906 Sears Roebuck catalog for the American vibrator. Tell me they're not connected. And this decline continued for decades, except for a small bump during the 1940s, which we may attribute to additional stress women faced as their husbands and brothers went off to fight in World War II. After the rise of modern feminism in the 1970s, hysteria was officially removed from the DSM in 1980. So what was actually causing female hysteria? Well, the cause is different depending on what time period you look at. But one thing that's consistent is that women were diagnosed with hysteria whenever they acted three-dimensional in a world that had only ever drawn them as a single line. But with the rise of Freudian theory at the turn of the century, many of the behaviors that used to result in a diagnosis for female hysteria were reclassified as anxiety neuroses, or a set of neurotic behaviors that stem from repressed anxiety. Oh, and if you're wondering why pelvic massages seem to work so well for what seem to be normal stress and anxiety, it's because orgasms feel really good. They flood your brain with oxytocin and dopamine, which improves mood and reduces stress. In fact, we can thank Sigmund Freud's fascination with hysteria for his eventual development of psychoanalysis. Even still, Freud's best guess at healing feminine neuroticisms was what it had been for centuries before: get married and have babies. As the field of psychology expanded in the 20th century, so too did the idea of male and female personhood, namely that both men and women experience the same range of emotion and feeling, and that mental health conditions were not like physical health conditions, which may be specific to genetic males and females, but could affect either sex equally. Female hysteria is a lesson in how unevolved thought can harm society. It took 4,000 years for humans to acknowledge that women were capable of anger and independence, and men of sadness and vulnerability. And those gendered perceptions still permeate our society today as women struggle to feel heard in discussions about their health and safety with doctors, lawyers, and policymakers. And men brush off the human experience of emotion as being unmanly and burdensome. Struggle is part of the human condition. No one comes out of life unscarred, but no one has to go through it alone either. This video was sponsored by Recovery Unplugged Behavioral Health. If you're struggling and you need help, Recovery Unplugged is here to make sure you get the care you need and the peace you deserve. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content on addiction and mental health recovery.